Thank you to the Wolfeboro Lions Club for underwriting nutritional wisdom. The Wolfeboro Lions Club is committed to helping the community with health concerns such as diabetes prevention and preservation of sight and hearing. The Wolfeboro Lions Club meets on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month in the 1812 room at the Wolfeboro Inn. Members of the community are encouraged to attend meetings or visit the website e-clubhouse.org/sites/Wolfeboro for more information.
Hi, it's Patty Walker, your registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator, welcoming you back for another episode of Nutritional Wisdom and continuation on our food labels. On our last show, I discussed what the sell-by and the use-by dates meant and what some of the common seals and stamps that you would find on the label mean and how to decipher them. So if you haven't had a chance to view that show, I really encourage you to go online to the Wolfeboro Community Television.com and you can look up online and YouTube, or just look up the episodes and you can refer back to that, and it's a good one to watch first, in all honesty. So if you haven't watched that one first, please go online and look at it. All right, today we're going to talk, the first thing I'm going to talk about is health claims. So the FDA actually has some definitions, and there's three claims that they put into three categories: health claims, nutrient claims, and then structure or function claims. And it's like, what the heck? But it gets rid of the confusion, because there used to be, with the Dairy Council, milk makes the body good. Well, what does that mean? It's confusing. So it can't be on the label anymore. So an example of a health claim would describe the food and its relationship to a disease or a health condition. Examples are: adequate calcium throughout life may reduce your risk of osteoporosis, or a diet high in vegetables may reduce your risk of certain cancers. Those are true. My issue with any claim is that they're often put on packages that aren't really associated with the claim, just to get you to buy the package. And people often misinterpret that, oh, well, yeah, a diet of fruit and vegetables may reduce my risk of cancer, so this product is going to reduce my risk of cancer. And let's say it's a spinach wrap. Well, a spinach wrap just has spinach powder in it. It doesn't have the real spinach. So it's misleading. And so I really, really encourage you to take any health claim with a grain of salt, okay? The FDA has done its best to make them evidence-based, which they are, but it doesn't prevent the manufacturer from putting claims on a package that don't necessarily belong or are associated with the food that's in the package. All right. The next one are nutrient claims, and these ones you are familiar with, and there's actually a little bit of standardization, not always, but a little bit of standardization. So you have your calories, you have your fat, you have your sugar, and you have your sodium, which you typically will see nutrient claims on. And what they do is they compare the item to the original form of the item. So we'll start with calories. If it's calorie-free, it means it's less than 5 calories in a portion. Calorie-free does not mean the entire package is calorie-free. So if there's 20 items or 20 servings in the package and you eat all 20, you could be eating close to 100 calories. So just realize the definition of fat-free is 5 calories or less in their serving size. Low calorie means 40 calories or less in the standard portion size. Reduced and less are the only terminology that is consistent. It means that there's 25% less, I don't care if it's calories, fat, grams of sugar, or sodium, than the original product. So reduced and less means 25% less. Okay? Light, in regards to calories, has nothing to do with what you would expect. Light means is 50% or less of the calories come from fat. I don't know if that's a useful term or not, but light means that. Okay, let's go on to fat. So if it's fat-free, this is where things get a little interesting. Fat-free means is less than a half a gram of fat in a serving. That also includes your saturated fats and your trans fats. So if they have less than a half a gram in their serving size on the label, they're going to put 0. And we'll get into that a little bit later when we go over some labels. But 0 does not mean that it's trans fat or saturated fat free if you eat larger than a portion size. All right. Low fat means 3 grams. Okay, 3 grams or less per serving. You know, what's interesting is a half a pat of butter is 2.5 grams. Is that low fat? I don't know. So sometimes these terminologies to me are a bit confusing. Low saturated fat means less than a gram. Low cholesterol means less than 20 grams. Again, that reduced and less means 25% less of whatever fat than the original. And light, well, this time light means 33 to 50% less fat than the original. So again, the light terminology is all over the place. All right, so sugar-free. Sugar-free means that there's less than a half gram of sugar. So like fat, saturated fat, trans fat, less than a half gram of sugar in the portion that they choose. No added sugar means that they did not add obvious sources of sugar, but they still could have fruit juice concentrates and other sources of sweeteners in there. And again, the reduced and less sugar is 25% less than the original product. And finally, sodium. So low sodium or salt-free means it's 5 grams or less in the serving. Very low sodium is 35 grams or less. Low sodium is 140 grams or less. And the reduced and less is 25% less than the original, as I said. And then the light is 50% less sodium. So light is a very confusing term. I really wish they didn't use it because it really has multiple definitions depending on what nutrient you're talking about. And finally, no added salt or unsalted means they didn't add salt or salt it. Okay, doesn't mean there's not broth in there or something, but they did not add salt. They did not add salt or use salt in the thing. The bottom line, especially with sodium, if you're don't count on the label for your sodium. I would always go to the nutrition fact and count your grams, because if you're looking for a low sodium diet, you probably know the grams that you're trying to not exceed. It could be 1,500, it could be 2,000 a day, but generally, you know, keeping your meals around 500 or less is always a good range for a low sodium or a sodium conserved diet. Okay, so if you watched episode 1, we talked about this low sodium broth. It was over 400 milligrams of sodium in just the broth, never mind the items you're going to have with it. So that would not have been a low sodium meal. All right. And then finally, you have the structural or functional claims. What does that mean? It describes how the nutrient or food directly affects a body's function. So examples of that is calcium builds strong bones. It does. That's a true statement. But calcium doesn't build strong bones without vitamin D, vitamin K2, and magnesium. But so the functional claims are a little bit iffy if you think that only calcium builds strong bones. A better example would be high fiber helps with bowel regularity. Yep, that's a good one. Let's go with that one. Okay, but sometimes you'll see those functional claims on a label. But again, don't get snookered into thinking because there's a claim on the label, it's a healthy food. What you really, really need to do is get to the side panel of the box, which is where the nutrition facts and ingredients are, because that's where the truth of the health actually lies. So I have a food label there. We're going to go through this step by step. And so the first thing that you're going to see, or actually you may not know, but in 2018 they redid the food, the ingredient facts or nutrition facts of the food label. And they made some great updates. One of the best or three of the best updates are the calories are now predominantly larger. You can see them. Serving size is larger. And they added a section underneath the sugar called added sugars. Those are all very, very useful and helpful parts of the label, and we'll get into why. Okay, so let's start at the top. When reading the nutrition facts and when reading that label, the most important part of the entire label is the serving size. 95% of my clients are going to say the calories is the most important part. That is not true. Serving size is the most important part because all of these numbers are based on the serving size. So in this example, the serving size is 2/3 of a cup, and there are 8 servings in the container. If you had 1 1/3 cups or maybe 2 cups of the product, you would have to multiply all of these numbers on the nutrition facts by 2 or 3, depending on what your intake was. A common example of that is a can of soup. Most of my clients, a can of soup is a single serving, whether it's the condensed soup by Campbell's or whether it's the larger cans of soup. If you look on the labels, it's going to say 2 servings, 2.5 servings per container. So you would actually have to multiply all of those numbers by the number of servings in a container. What also used to happen was the Coke bottles, 8 ounces was a serving. So, the cans are 16 ounces, it would say 2 servings, or the 20-ounce bottles, it will say 2.5 servings, but people don't look at that. They say, oh, there's only 100 calories in a serving. Well, if it's 20-ounce bottle, it's 250 calories for the bottle. So really understanding that the portion size and serving is the most important critical thing on that label helps you understand the rest of it. So let's go down the label, and first you're going to see the calories. Underneath that is total fat. Under total fat, you're going to see it being indented. It says saturated fat and trans fats are indented under the word total fat. Anytime you see something indented underneath, it's part of the number above. So you're going to see that with total fat and total carbohydrate, which I'll get into in a little bit. So in this example, the total fat is 8 grams. Saturated fat, which is a fat that you want to reduce if you have a risk of heart disease, and to reduce chronic diseases in general, you want to have less saturated fat. There's 1 gram. Trans fat says 0. When we get to the ingredient list, I am going to go over, if you ever see the word partially hydrogenated oil, that is a trans fat. So again, the manufacturer can put 0 up on the trans fat, and in the ingredient list, if you see partially hydrogenated oil, know that trans fats are in the product, but because they chose a serving size small enough, there's less than 1/2 gram of trans fat in that portion. But if you eat more, and we'll get into a good example a little later on. So you have total fat 8 grams, saturated fat 1 gram, trans fat 0. Well, we can do some simple math. 8 minus 1 is 7, minus 0 is 7. So where is the other 7 grams of fat come from? Well, that's what they don't have to put on the label as far as the types of fat, but those are the healthy fats. Those would be your vegetable fats. They might be your omega-3 fats. They might be your fish oils, your olive oil. So those fats are healthier, so they're not put on the label. The fats that have the highest association with disease risk are your saturated and trans fats. That's why those are listed on the labels. American Heart Association would recommend 7 to 10% of your total calories coming from saturated fat and less than 1 gram per day from trans fats. All right. The next item is cholesterol. Cholesterol is only found in animal products, so when you see these Crisco in a tub, which is made from soybean oil, saying cholesterol free. Well, goodness, I hope so. It's not from an animal. But they will put cholesterol free so that you can buy it, so that you will buy it. By the way, Crisco in a tub is full of trans fat, so don't buy it. Okay, I know it makes the best pie crust. It's okay once or twice a year at Thanksgiving and Christmas, but on a regular basis, please don't use Crisco in a can. Okay, full of trans fats. Don't do it. American Heart Association recommends 300 milligrams or less of cholesterol a day. So there's your guidelines for that. Sodium. People's needs for sodium vary so much. If you're a construction worker and you're outside all day and you are perspiring, or you're an athlete and you perspire a lot, you have a higher sodium need. If you have some medical conditions such as congestive heart failure or high blood pressure, you would want less sodium. So people's sodium needs vary so much, and it's best to ask your doctor or your dietitian what your sodium needs are and what best range is for you. But a good rule of thumb is if the milligrams of sodium exceed the calories in the product, put it down. In this case, 160 milligrams of sodium and 230 calories, that's okay. I'm going to show you other examples where it would not be a good example. I mean, it would be a food you would want to pass on, all right? All right, so the next category is total carbohydrates. Boy, talk about Pandora's box. People are either on no carbs, keto, high carbs. It is all over the place. And I will say people's carbohydrate tolerance can be quite individual. The best evidence is that a diet high in whole grains and mostly from plant-based foods, which would be a high carbohydrate diet, is your best bet to reduce any long-term risk for chronic disease. Unfortunately, most of the food we produce and consume in our country are processed carbohydrates of sugar and white flour, which called enriched flour, and those are what set us up for chronic diseases. And a couple of the examples I'd used in the past episode on labels showed the amount of added sugar that was added to some cereals. That was surprising, more than 2 teaspoons of added sugar in a serving of cereal. So sugar is added to foods, but nonetheless. So total carbohydrates are there. Underneath it, you're going to see fiber, and you're going to see sugar. Under the sugar is added sugar, and this is such a great improvement on the labels. So first, let's just talk about the fiber and the sugar. Fiber is super important for preventing disease and for keeping regularity and getting rid of toxins in your body. Fiber does so much. It feeds your good, healthy microbiome in your large intestines. So the average person should have between 25 and 50 grams of fiber a day. Right now we're around 12 in our country, so we all could benefit from a little bit more fiber. Fiber only comes from plant-based products, so natural fiber does. So oftentimes you're going to see foods that have no natural fiber saying, now with added fiber. It's a synthetic fiber. Is it the best source? Maybe, maybe not. I prefer getting the fiber from the real food. So fiber is listed because it's an ingredient you want more of. Sugar is also listed. So fiber and sugar are under the total carbohydrates. In this example, you have 37 grams of carbohydrate, 4 grams of fiber, and 12 grams of sugar. So 12 plus 4 is 16, 37. Where are the 19 other grams of carbohydrate? They come from the other grains. That would be your flour and your starches. They are not mandated to be put on a label. You'll often see them on cereal boxes. You'll see that third term, other carbohydrates, and then all the numbers add up pretty, okay? Why I really like the added sugar line is because some foods have natural sugar. So your yogurt, your plain yogurt, your milk, your fresh fruit, all those are incredibly healthy food choices. And they have natural sugar. The milk and the yogurt have lactose. The fruit has fructose. So if you're putting a label on it, The calories come from their sugar, their natural sugar. What now we can identify is how much of the sugar is natural versus how much is added, and this is super, super important. American Heart Association recommends 24 grams of or less of added sugar for women, 36 grams or less of added sugar for men, and it's almost impossible not to go over that unless you choose foods that don't have added sugars. Okay, what I find super, super unfortunate is if you look all the way to the right, beside the added sugar, you're going to see 20%. So those percentages over there, percentage of daily value, what the government is saying that if you eat 10 grams of sugar, you only are meeting 20% of your sugar needs, added sugar needs. I'm thinking, what the heck? If you multiply that to 100%, they're saying 50 grams of sugar is your daily sugar need. And it's like, that is so wrong, okay? So never go by the percentages on the side. Those percentages on the side are based on the needs of a healthy individual who needs a 12,000 calorie diet. It's a small percentage of the population. But again, I would never recommend 50 grams of added sugar being healthy for anyone. I am appalled that that's there, and I really, really encourage you not to look or use those percentages on the side. I get so many clients getting confused. Oh, I only had like 13% fat, and I'm like, but how many grams of that? I don't know. And they're going over their totals all the time because they don't understand the percentage. So the only percentage I really would encourage you to meet would be the fiber percentage. You really want to have a minimum of 25 grams up to 50 grams of fiber a day. All right. And then the last items that you'll see in a label are your vitamin D, your calcium, your iron, and your potassium. And again, those nutrients are very individualized per person. Iron, for instance, if you're a woman in childbearing years, you have a higher iron need than postmenopausal women or men. In New Hampshire, the majority of us are at risk for vitamin D deficiency, so we have a higher vitamin D requirement than people that might live in Florida. So those are best, again, used based on the milligrams if you're trying to add up your grams of calcium or vitamin D, etc., instead of going with the percentages on the side, because the percentages on the side to me don't mean anything. Okay. All right, so hopefully that explains what's going on as far as what's on a nutrition fact. The next thing I want you to look at is the ingredients, and the ingredients are listed in order of weight. So an example would be canned green beans. If you go to the grocery store, you get a can of green beans, it's going to say green beans first, then it's going to say water, then it's going to say salt. If you get unsalted, it's only going to say green beans and water. So that's a good thing. So they're listed in order of weight. So Michael Pollan is a food advocate and an author, and a well-respected, and he's written many books on healthy food choices, and a couple of his guidelines are try not to buy a food with a label. So that would be like fruits and vegetables and beans and like the real item. You don't need multiple listings of ingredients because the food is actually the only ingredient in it. So that would be your first and best option. Otherwise, try to limit the ingredients to 5 or less, and limit the ingredients to items that your grandmother would recognize as a food. So here are my guidelines for ingredients. Reminder, again, ingredients are listed by weight. So whole grains, we've gone over the importance of whole grains. If it's a bread, if it's a cereal, if it's a cracker item, you want to make sure the very, very first ingredient says whole grain. Okay? If it says enriched, put it back. For your cereals, you want to have at least 5 grams of fiber per serving, and for your breads and your crackers, a minimum of 2 to 3 grams per serving would be a great choice. And whole grains would be on the front of that. You don't need to look for the whole grain seal. Just make sure there's fiber and make sure the first ingredient says whole grain. And you want to also minimize the amount of sources of flour, because once you alter the grain, it does change how our body uses it. So flour does spike your blood sugar higher, quicker than any whole grain. So in my opinion, the best whole grain breads would be your Ezekiel breads, which are only 100% sprouted whole grain and have no flour in them. Also have no added sugar. So that's another thing. I challenge you to go to any bread aisle and find a bread that doesn't have flour or sugar in it. If you can't find it, go to the freezer section of your grocery store and get the Ezekiel bread. That's your best option for breads. All right. And then just kind of check out the number of times you see the word sodium and salt or any type of sugar. There are over 50 different sweeteners that the manufacturers put in the food. If the word ends with OSE, it's a sugar. Fructose, maltose, glucose, lactose, all are sugars. So just be aware of that. You want to avoid trans fats, which is, again, that partially hydrogenated food. What a trans fat is, it's a man-made fat that takes a liquid vegetable oil and makes it solid at room temperature. So I had discussed earlier the Crisco in a tub. That's soybean oil that's naturally liquid at room temperature, which is now solid in the can. So our body doesn't break those down very well, and trans fats are the number one greatest risk for heart disease. So you want to avoid trans fats. You do not want them. They're put in the item because they extend the shelf life and give it some nice crispy, tender properties. Ritz Crackers used to have trans fats in it. Now they changed to palm oil, which is a saturated fat, which still gives the same texture, but it's still not a healthy fat. Okay. And then high fructose corn syrup. That is a sweetener I do recommend. It's a very refined sweetener that is much sweeter than sugar, and it is associated with heart disease. It's associated with diabetes. It's associated with gout. It is a sugar that's stored as fat very quickly. So please look at the ingredient label to see if there's anything called high fructose corn syrup. You'll also see it as corn sugar or corn syrup now. So the corn industry is getting clever. All right. So those are my examples for the label. So I want to just give you three ways or three final examples on how to put it all together. So the first example is whole wheat Ritz Crackers. A client of mine brought this into me years ago, very excited because I talked to him about not using enriched flour, and his favorite cracker was whole wheat. So he brings me in the box of whole grain Ritz Crackers, and right on the front it says whole grain, made with whole grains. And you'll notice there's no whole grain seal on it. That should be a tip off, although I don't ever want you to use the whole grain seal as the be all end all. But it does say made with 5 grams of whole grain. 5 grams is not very much if you know that to get a whole grain seal it has to be 8 grams. So then at the very bottom, another really confusing thing is they have suggested serving. And there's a stack of crackers. There's about 8 crackers there. And then to the left, there's a cracker with a little bit of meat or something on it. But that's what they're talking about, suggested serving, how to serve the cracker with an accompaniment on top. They're not saying the suggested serving is the stack of 8 crackers, which is not unusual for a serving of Ritz Crackers. Half the sleeve, if not the sleeve, could be a serving for most of us. So if you look at the label, go to the nutrition facts, and you're going to see the serving size is 5. I don't know anyone that eats 5 crackers, 5 Ritz Crackers. It's an odd number. It just doesn't work, okay? And then if you look further down, you're going to see it has saturated fat. It certainly has more sodium than it does calories. It's a very poor source of fiber. Remember, we're looking for 2 to 3 grams per serving for a cracker, and this has less than a gram. And it has 2 grams of sugar, which is a half a teaspoon. And if you look on the ingredient list, you're going to see it has high fructose corn syrup as one of those sugars, and enriched flour is the first ingredient. It is a trifecta of salt, fat, and sugar, which is typical of the standardized American diet. It lights up the pleasure center when we eat this food, and it is super unhealthy. So I really encourage you, if you're trying to reverse or prevent diseases, to pass on that particular cracker. Okay. Next we have Wheat Thins, a better choice, but it still has some pitfalls. Again, 100% whole grain. And this one actually does have the whole grain stamp, 100% whole grain stamp on the top of the box. I just didn't take a picture of that. And it has 21 of the 31 grams from whole grain. And it only lists whole grain flour on the ingredient list. So far, so good. Unfortunately, it still contains saturated fat. It has more sodium than calories, and it has 4 grams of added sugar, which is which is a teaspoon of added sugar. So it also has 4 different types of sweeteners in it. So again, it's better, but I'd still give it a pass. So what cracker would you want? A good example would be Triscuits. Triscuits, 3 ingredients. Even the front of the box is very simple. 100% whole grain. Again, the whole grain, 100% whole grain stamp is on the top of that box as you open it up. 3 grams of fiber, hooray. No added sugar, no saturated fats, no trans fats. The only issue that I have with this product is it does have a little bit more sodium than calories, but they do also make a hint of salt variety, which would only have 50 milligrams of sodium, and all the rest of the ingredients are the same, which would be the best of the best. And the bonus is that it's a non-GMO project food, so the wheat doesn't have the glyphosate in it, so it's a good product. So that would be a good example of a cracker. So hopefully that made sense, and I tried to incorporate all the different health claims, the seals, the stamps, how to read the label, how to read the nutrition facts, and what the ingredients mean. So my goal is that you will shop a little easier and choose healthier foods and save some money. So now that August is here, we have an abundance of tomatoes and peppers and cilantro in the garden. So I have a quick, easy salsa recipe. So again, you don't have to buy it in the jar, which is going to be much higher in sodium. So ingredients are there. You can use the cherry or the grape tomatoes, or just cut up a couple of your own tomatoes of your choice. You want the cilantro, half a cup of cilantro, some lime juice, onions. Onions should be in your garden. If not, go to the farmer's market. You want to choose a sweet onion and choose half a sweet onion. Chop it up finely. Little bit of salt, and salt is optional. You can reduce that if you want to. And if you like it spicy, then go for a half or a full jalapeno pepper. Chop it up and enjoy. Thank you so much. Wishing you a blessed rest of your summer.